The truth about cops. They make everybody nervous. That's what we're talking about today on the Driving with Rob podcast. There is so much rhetoric these days about how nervous and anxious a black person feels when he has a cop behind him. What you're not hearing from people is that white people get just as nervous when they have a cop behind them. The problem is your perception of why you're nervous. Black folks need to stop telling each other that the cops want to kill you. They don't. That nervous, uneasy feeling when you have a patrol officer behind your car going down the highway, white people get just as nervous and just as apprehensive. But the difference is white people are not telling their children that police officer is probably going to shoot you in the head. First of all, it's not true. Second of all, you need to stop telling each other that. You're just making the fear and anxiety worse. It's a natural, normal fear and anxiety when you have a patrol officer behind you. Here is a man who has the authority, or a woman, who has the authority to put you in handcuffs and take you to jail just on suspicion. He has a gun, and he has the authority to use it if he deems it necessary to use it. And that's part of where the anxiety comes from. Of course it makes you nervous when you get a cop behind you. Everybody gets nervous when they get a cop behind them. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. Everybody gets nervous and afraid when they get a cop behind them. If you're actually concerned about what that police officer can and will do to you, what that officer has the authority to do to you, just follow the rules and there won't be a problem. I used to get pulled over by the cops all the time as a white person. So I couldn't say that I was being targeted by the police because of the color of my skin. But when I was a teenager, I used to get pulled over by the cops all the time. I got pulled over by the cops the day I got my driver's license. That same day. And I was profiled. I was targeted. And that's why I got pulled over. But the reason I was profiled and targeted was not because of the color of my skin. You know what the cop told me? He said, the reason I pulled you over is because you didn't look old enough to be driving a car. I had just turned 16. I had just gotten my driver's license. And I was profiled and pulled over under suspicion because I looked like I might be doing something illegal. But I didn't get shot. I didn't get beaten up. I didn't get put in handcuffs. But the reason this went down in the report as a routine traffic stop, when the officer pulled me over, I showed him the respect that a man in his position deserves. I don't think I said yes, officer, but I said yes, sir, a lot. Because I was scared to death. And he had the authority, and I knew he had the authority to do whatever he deemed necessary. So I didn't give him a reason to escalate. Yes, sir, I said, is there a problem? And what is the typical patrol officer's response? Let me see your license and registration. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't happy. He wasn't trying to put me at ease. Let me see your license and registration. So I got out my license. And because I had just turned 16 and had just gotten my driver's license, I had a new wallet, a new leather wallet, and the license was stuck. And the harder my hand shook, the harder it was for me to get that driver's license out of my wallet. 1,000 thoughts are running through your head. I thought he was going to take me to jail because I couldn't get my license out of my wallet. I was really scared. So when I finally, with my hands shaking, looking like I was nervous, looking like I was up to something, knowing that that's how I looked and couldn't control it, I handed him my license and registration and asked him again, did I do something wrong? He told me, stay here. I'll be right back. So he took my license and registration back to his car because back in those days, which would have been the 1970s, He didn't have an onboard computer. He had to radio it in and wait for them to respond. And I'm sitting there terrified that this is going to go bad at any moment. And after several minutes, which felt like hours, he came back up to the driver's side window and gave me my driver's license and registration back and said, "Everything's fine, there's no problem." And now he was a little nicer, and he had kind of lost his attitude and lost his edge, which kind of put me at ease. He said, "The reason that I pulled you over is because you didn't look old enough to drive." Then he smiled and said, "Happy birthday." And I said, "Thanks." What I was really thinking was, yeah, thanks a lot. You took 10 years off my life just from worry and stress. Thanks a lot, pal. But I didn't say that. But you see, this could have gone so wrong so quickly if I had responded differently. If I had been so scared that I tried to outrun the cops, that situation would have escalated very quickly. And the officer's attitude and demeanor would have changed very quickly. If once he took my license and registration and went back to his car, if I had been so afraid that I tried to run, well, now his level of suspicion goes through the roof. Obviously, this kid is up to something. And that situation would have gone horribly wrong. If when the patrol officer came over to the window and I rolled my window down, and I, as a 16-year-old boy who didn't look like he was old enough to drive, had immediately gotten mouthy, "Why'd you pull me over? You ain't got no business pulling me over." That situation could have gone bad really quick. But it didn't go bad really quick. Number one, because I was scared to death. And number two, because I had been taught. And I don't know that I'd actually been taught, just from everything I had been taught, about how to treat people in positions of authority, as humbly and respectfully as I could. "Yes, sir. Did I do something wrong?" License and registration. Now, I could have said, "Why do you need to see my license and registration? What you hassling me for?" But I didn't do that. I got out my license and registration and handed it to him. When he brought me my license and registration back, and he told me there wasn't a problem, he didn't say he was sorry he stopped me. He didn't need to say that, because he had the full authority to stop me, based on nothing more than his suspicion. He had that right, and he had that authority. At that point, I personally could have caused it to go bad. "Yeah, I knew I didn't do nothing wrong. You need to think twice before you pull people over." I could have said that, but I didn't. So the situation didn't go wrong. See, what you have to understand, it's really not the color of your skin that gets you killed by the police. That's not what the rioters and protesters want you to hear, but it's the truth. Your actions determine how you get treated by the police. The way you respond to police has a lot more to do with how you're treated by the police than the color of your skin. The people who are trying to generate chaos and are trying to encourage people to riot won't tell you that. They want you to keep believing that you got pulled over because you were black. But really think about the times that you've been pulled over. And like I said, when I was a teenager, I used to get pulled over all the time because I was a new driver. I was still learning how to drive. Even though I had a license, I still didn't drive like it was second nature, like I do now. But see, now I've been driving for over 40 years. I have learned to anticipate what's happening ahead of me on the highway. So now when I drive, I don't make jerky, erratic motions like I used to. I've driven long enough now that just by the sound of the engine and the feel of the handling, I have a pretty good idea of how fast I'm going. But when I was a young driver, if I was on an open, straight stretch of road, it wasn't unusual for me to go faster and faster and faster. And I didn't realize that I was going faster and faster. And it got me into trouble. So yeah, I got pulled over a lot when I was younger, but it's because I was younger. and because I was an inexperienced driver. And I would do things on the road that would cause the patrol officer to be suspicious. I looked suspicious. I've heard friends of mine say that they got pulled over just because they were black. Well, did you really get pulled over because you were black? Or did you get pulled over because you were staring at the cop as you drove past him? Because remember, that cop is a person too. And if somebody's staring at you, what's the first thing you think of? Why is he staring at me? Did you get pulled over because you were black, or did you get pulled over because you were staring at the cop? Now, maybe you were staring because of your suspicion of the cop. But when the cop thinks, why is he staring at me? He automatically thinks you're up to something, or you wouldn't be staring at a cop. Maybe you got pulled over because you had a brake light out. Maybe you got pulled over because it looked like the bumper was about to fall off your car. Maybe you got pulled over because you look like a young, inexperienced driver. Did you really get pulled over because you were black? And keep in mind, there's another point that I would like to make. And I'd never really thought about this before until we had a police officer come to the place where I work to do a little talk, to do a little presentation. I'd never really thought about it before until I heard this police officer say, police officers get nervous at every traffic stop. There are horror stories of police officers pulling over a car because they had a taillight out, and then the driver pulls a gun on them. Police officers get nervous at every traffic stop. And you need to be aware that that police officer is nervous too. Put his mind at ease by letting him know you intend to follow the rules. And you do that by showing the officer the respect. Yes, sir. Is there a problem? And don't be surprised if he's not nice about it when he says, let me see your license and registration. Yes, sir. And if you didn't do anything wrong, and there's not anything wrong with your car, there's no reason for this situation to become a situation. And once everything checks out, chances are he's just going to let you go. He may write you a ticket, but he didn't write you a ticket because of the color of your skin. He wrote you a ticket because you deserved a ticket, and he had the authority to give it to you. But the message that I want to get across today is that everybody gets nervous when they have an interaction with the police. Everybody. But you need to understand that that police officer doesn't want to hurt you. That police officer doesn't want the situation to escalate. And that really the difference between a good interaction with the police and a bad one has a lot more to do with how you react to the situation. Cops are people too. You treat them with respect, they'll treat you with respect. But everybody gets nervous when they get pulled over by the cops. Don't let your fear and anxiety turn it into a bad situation. You can cause that situation to go bad. All you have to do is use a little common sense and a little respect for the authority that that officer has. And there's no reason that a traffic stop ever has to go bad. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Driving with Rob podcast. I appreciate you downloading. Appreciate you listening. Click on like. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Leave me a comment and I'll try to respond. Thanks again. I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.